The South African Arms and Ammunition Dealers Association, as well as Gun Free South Africa, agree firearm violence in the country is far from being reduced. Both organizations agree that the police alone cannot deal with the problem. A report by Gun Free South Africa and the African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum has revealed there are problems at the Central Firearms Register. A member of Gun Free South Africa, Adele Kirsten, joins us now. Thank you very much, Adele, for your time this afternoon. Let's start with detailing some of the problems that you have picked up.
Good afternoon, Dudizile. The problems at the Central Firearms Registry are historical. Since around about 2010, 2011, the then minister identified problems around processing of gun licenses, but also the beginning of the first instances of reported fraud and corruption in the licensing regime. So it's been around for a long time, but it's also systemic in the sense that the systems are not implemented as foreseen in the Firearms Control Act. It occurs again and again, the same problems occurring again and again, with corruption being really a key element in the dysfunction of the Central Firearms Registry. And this is one of the reasons that one is seeing this kind of increasing movement of guns from the licensed and legal market into the illicit market.
Let's pick up on the corruption, because the report highlighted that police should not be relied on to properly manage guns in the country. If you can't rely on the police, then who do you rely on?
Well, that's a key question that the research report engages with. And in our discussion with global experts, there's not a clear way forward. So what the research did is it looked at what do other countries do in managing their kind of central record-keeping system for licensed firearms, which includes, firearms of the state. And basically the report found there are three different ways in which a very small handful of countries address the issue. One is to privatize and to get into a kind of private-public partnership, such as happened in the Dominican Republic. The key concern there is that the profit motive and the kind of commercial purpose of the partnership is dominant rather than that of public safety. The second one we explored in countries that we saw that's used in countries like Thailand, Japan and Switzerland is what's called a devolution of authority. So where the licensing regime, the authority to issue licenses, is devolved into municipalities, into provinces, and so there's not a national database. That creates opportunities for kind of local interest groups to also engage in the issue, to raise concerns about who or who should not be getting a license. And then the third option was to create an independent authority, which remains kind of within the state or in another government department, but that independent authority would then report regularly to the police. And there is some argument that controlling weapons is about community safety, and it's not necessarily a wholly policing function. So this really is exploratory research to say that our current system isn't working. Are there other countries that we can learn from about what could work?
You speak of a database. If you visited a police station for whatever reason, you'd observe that you will need to manually fill out a form. Let's say you need an affidavit, or if the police officer is taking down a statement, they do so manually. And it appears that also where this issue of gun control is concerned, you've got outdated record keeping. What has been the resistance to digitization?
That's a difficult question to answer, but certainly I think right from the get-go, when the Firearms Control Amendment Act was passed in 2000, There was a move to have an electronic system, and then there was an existing manual system. And for a range of reasons, whether it's about will, whether it's about lack of capacity, where poor understanding of the system and what's required, but that the Central Firearms Registry has continued to maintain a double system. Some stuff is electronically done and some is done manually. That's a perfect recipe for corruption, because in a way your right hand doesn't know what your left hand is doing. So the move towards a kind of much more integrated database is critical, and we're aware that in April SAPS announced that they just awarded, they don't say to how much the tender was, but to Providence Software Solutions to actually put in place a kind of new database or record-keeping system. And of course, the public, we don't know about this. We don't know how much it's costed, and what the costing is. And Gunfree would urge that SAPS reports regularly to the Portfolio Committee on Police on progress on how the system is being introduced into the Central Firearms Registry.
What of going at the heart of the source, because it's such a multi-pronged problem, if you will, Adele, especially when we speak also of cross-border activity where guns are brought into the country or guns are taken out of the country. These are sophisticated syndicates who are making a killing, for lack of a better expression, from this. It's a lucrative business.
You've hit the nail on the head, Duduzile. It's a lucrative business, and that's what drives a lot of the trade, whether legal or illegal, in firearms. And this is a global phenomenon. And in fact, it's one of the, in talking to global experts, it was one of the kind of strong warnings against privatizing. That in fact the risks for corruption are greater, is their sense within that kind of system. But in South Africa and in most other countries across the world, there's a very clear understanding that if you want to address the proliferation of illegal weapons in your society, you really have to do two things. The one is you have to recover those weapons that are in circulation. And this is what we call kind of track and trace. So you have to recover them, but once you've recovered them, you need to determine the source so that we understand where's the leakage coming from. Is this from state armory? Is it cross-border trade? Is it weapons that are not within our country's borders? So it's critical to recover, to track and trace, and then to destroy. So to remove these guns from circulation completely. Then the second intervention is you have to control your licensed stocks, because the majority of guns start their life off as a legal weapon. And it's when they move from the legal market into the illicit market that they become illegal weapons. And so you have to tighten, as we call it, turn off the tap. You have to have a very clear record-keeping system so that at any moment the state can know what are the guns that we have in this country, who owns them, and what is the purpose for that ownership. Is it self-defense? Is it hunting? What are our official institutions stocks? As you know, our government departments are issued with firearms. At this stage, we don't know the extent to state ownership of guns. So it's really those two key interventions. You have to recover, track and trace and destroy, and then you have to control and tighten your control on your legal stocks. And record keeping and efficient and accurate record keeping is absolutely critical for both of these interventions.
Well, a couple of guns were destroyed, is it about a week ago, where the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemola, made it known that on that particular afternoon when they were giving an update in terms of their operations as the police, they'd be destroying some guns. Does that go some way to satisfy organizations like yourselves?
Well, it goes a long way to removing 15,000 weapons. And in many instances, you have one gun killing between 10 and 15 people. So that's saving a lot of lives. Of course, it makes a huge difference for increased safety for all of us, but it's not enough. And to say that it's SAPS must be commended for doing it, but this is their job, and it's a requirement under some of our international agreements that you're required to publicly destroy your surplus stocks or stocks that have been recovered. So in a sense, they're doing what they're required to do. They're not going the extra mile. The extra mile would be removing hundreds and thousands of weapons that are in circulation. And they need to be coordinated, it needs to be intelligence-driven, and it needs to be a long-term strategy. It can't just be a kind of once-off, flurry of activity to remove guns. So it is important. Any gun that's removed from circulation and destroyed makes our country safer.
Adele Kirsten is with Gun Free South Africa. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.